This is an overview video on how to answer question 2 of paper 2's period study. The idea of this video is that you can learn how to answer the question to score as many marks as possible, based on what the examiner is looking for. The question will always be asked just like this. Write a narrative account analysing, and then you'll be given 2 stimulus points. It will be worth 8 marks. This is the mark scheme for this question. Now it tells us that 4 marks are available for AO2, which is where you write an analytical narrative, and by that we mean that you're analysing causation, consequence, and change. 4 marks are also available for AO1, which is your knowledge and understanding. So, what is an analytical narrative? Remember, it's not just telling a story, they're asking you to do a little bit more than that. So, they've given you an event and you need to say A happened, and as a result of A, B happened, and as a result of B, C happened. And in laying it out like that, you're showing that you've got a really good knowledge of the topic and of the, good understanding, but you're being analytical. That's because you're explaining why A led to B and why B led to C. So just to reiterate, listing A and then B and then C, just like you're telling a story, is only going to score you in the lower bands. To score in the higher bands, you need to be explaining A and how it led to B, explaining B and why it led to C. That's your analysis and your evaluation, and that is what's going to push you into the top bands for this question. Essentially, this question is asking you why the events unfolded in the way they did. So that requires you to make connections between them to show that you can logically understand the whole topic, and that you're being analytical in showing how one event led to another. It's also important to remember that the AOs depend on each other, so that means no matter how well you perform in one of them, if your performance isn't quite as good in the other, then it means that you can't progress into the next band. So make sure you're being both analytical and using your own knowledge just to make sure that you've secured the top bands. These are the bands for this question. To score highly on this question, organisation is really important. The examiner needs to be able to follow what you're saying, so giving your answer nice and clearly and laying it out in a structure that's easy to follow makes it much easier for the examiner to score you highly. Maybe giving the events chronologically is a good way of doing this. Remember though that you're not telling a story, you're not just listing one event after another. This is an analytical narrative, so if you're giving an event, you can maybe summarise it in a sentence. You don't need to go into loads of detail. What's more important is what comes next. So you need to explain, why was that event important? What did it lead to? That's your analysis, and that's what's going to get you the marks, really. It's also really important that you use your own knowledge. So you might notice at the bottom of bands 2 and 3 that there's a mark ceiling, where it says that you can't score higher than the middle bands or even score in the top band if you only use the stimulus points. So drawing on evidence from your own knowledge is really, really important to boost you into the higher bands. Let's take a look at an example to see all of this put into action. This example is taken from the Superpower Relations and Cold War option. It says, write a narrative account analysing the Berlin crisis of 1948-9. You may use the following in your answer: the Berlin blockade of 1948, the Berlin airlift of 1948-49. You must also use information of your own. 8 marks. These are some of the points that you could have included in your answer. A good example is that the Western powers combined their zones into bizonia and then trizonia. So that's your event, and then you can explain that in a little bit more detail. So you can say that this increased Soviet concerns about a powerful capitalist unified Berlin, and even the threat that this would be a base for the Western military. So I haven't just listed the point, I've explained in a little bit more detail the consequences of that event. And that analysis is really important for scoring highly in this question.